Only 1% still do one ancient squat. Not because it was lost, because the world built chairs instead. Your pelvic lymphatic system has no pump, no heart, no muscle driving it forward. It moves only one way, through you, through your motion, through your depth, through your descent. The ancients knew this. Every longevity culture, Okinawa, Sardinia, the populations your doctors now study, had one thing in common that no modern research is documenting. They squatted deep, every day, for decades, not as exercise, as maintenance. Most men assume that what comes after 40 is inevitable. The joints, the metabolism, the cognitive fog that settles in the late 40s. What they are not told is that a significant portion of that decline has a single upstream driver. Pelvic lymphatic stagnation is not a clinical diagnosis. It is not in the blood panel your doctor orders, but it is present in nearly every man who has spent the last decade in a chair. Most men have been told that inflammation is caused by their diet, that stress drives aging, that testosterone decline is just biology. Those are downstream symptoms. The pelvic lymphatic network is upstream, and what it drains, gut immunity, reproductive waste, fascial hydration, and the systemic inflammatory load accumulating silently in the basin of your body, is a list that will change how you interpret every health signal you have been managing. There are 17 liters of lymphatic fluid cycling through your body right now. 17 liters of metabolic waste, immune signals, and cellular debris, moving through a system with zero mechanical force behind it. The moment you stopped descending to this depth, that system began to stall. That stagnation has a name, and it has a biological cost. This is not a flexibility video. This is not a yoga tutorial. What follows is a biological decode of one of the most overlooked drainage mechanisms in the male body. If you are over 40, this matters more than your VO2 max. We are going to show you why 99% of the modern population stopped doing this position, and why that single shift may be the most underreported driver of accelerated aging in men. We are going to go into what the hold duration threshold actually is, and what happens in the tissue above it and below it. And we are going to decode exactly what pelvic lymph drains, because the list is longer than you have been told, and what is on it is going to reframe everything. Feel where you are holding tension in your hips right now, that compression through the inner groin, that tightness in the pelvic floor. That is not just posture. That is the first signal of a stalled system. The lymphatic system is the most ignored system in the human body. Your cardiologist tracks your heart. Your neurologist tracks your brain. Nobody tracks your lymph until it fails. Here is what it actually does in the pelvic basin. Below your navel, there is a network of lymph nodes and capillaries, the inguinal chain, the iliac nodes, the deep pelvic collectors. They drain the gut, the gonads, the reproductive organs, the pelvic floor musculature, the fascia surrounding the prostate and bladder. Systemic immune waste from every major reproductive and digestive process in your body moves through this network. When it flows, inflammation is cleared. When it stalls, and it stalls in men who sit for more than 6 hours a day, cytokines accumulate. Inflammatory signals build without resolution. The cellular aging cascade begins. Here is the mechanism. Lymphatic capillaries have no muscle layer. They are not arteries. They respond to one stimulus only: mechanical pressure from surrounding tissue. Movement, compression, sustained descent. Malasana, the deep yogic squat, generates something that no other movement replicates. At full depth, the hip flexors, the adductors, and the pelvic floor are simultaneously under stretch and load. Intra-abdominal pressure increases. The perineum, the base of the pelvic basin, descends toward the floor. And the lymphatic capillaries in the inguinal and iliac chains receive a mechanical signal they have not received since you last squatted at this depth. This is mechanotransduction. Your cells respond to physical force. Lymphatic endothelial cells, the walls of your lymph vessels, are mechanosensitive. Sustained pressure, sustained stretch, sustained depth. These are not passive stretching events. They are biological activation signals. The endothelial cells lining these capillaries respond to shear stress, the mechanical force generated when surrounding tissue stretches under load. When you descend into full malasana, you generate exactly this shear force along the pelvic lymphatic network. This is structural physiology. It is why this position specifically, not a half squat, not a seated stretch, activates the drainage response. Depth is the variable. Duration is the trigger. 99% of modern men never reach this depth, not because of flexibility, because of architecture. The toilet replaced the squat. The chair replaced the floor. The average man over 40 has not achieved full pelvic floor descent in years, and the lymphatic system adjusted by slowing. That is why this position was preserved in yogic lineages, not for spiritual advancement, for hydraulic maintenance. Pause here. The last time you sat fully on the floor, not a chair, not a couch, when was it? Most men cannot answer that without effort. That gap is not trivial. That gap is systemic. Come to the floor. Stand with your feet slightly wider than your hips. Take a breath. Gently turn your feet outwards, both feet, at a comfortable angle. Not forced, not aggressive. Just an easy outward rotation that opens the base of the pelvis. Now begin your descent. Slow, controlled. As you lower, keep your knees wide apart. Let them track over your toes. Let the pelvis settle toward the floor. Try to keep your feet flat, heels grounded if possible. If the heels lift, that is fine. A folded mat or a thin book beneath them is sufficient in week 1. The ground contact at the heel matters. It changes how the pelvic floor loads at depth. Once you are settled at the base, bring your hands into a prayer position at your chest. Palms together, thumbs lightly touching the sternum. This is not ceremony. It changes the thoracic load and helps the spine find length at depth. Now gently lengthen your spine. Not a dramatic straightening, a soft upward intention through the crown of the head. Feel the lower back lift slightly away from collapse. The pelvis is descending. The spine is rising. These two forces working together. Finally, gently press your elbows against your inner thighs. A soft, steady outward pressure. This deepens the opening through the adductors and inguinal nodes. This is not a stretch cue. This is a drainage cue. You are now in the position that 99% of modern men never reach. Now, the hold. The threshold is 90 seconds. Below 90 seconds, you are stretching. At 90 seconds and beyond, the mechanical load initiates lymphatic response in the pelvic basin. The pressure signal reaches the endothelial layer. Fluid begins to move. Once in the morning, once in the evening. 3 minutes of investment per day. No equipment, no program to purchase, no gym required. Just depth and duration. Week 1, you will feel significant compression through the inner groin and adductors. Do not shorten the hold. That tightness is the tissue under sustained mechanical load for the first time in years. It is not damage, it is activation. Most men at this stage also notice something else. A warmth that starts in the inner thigh and moves toward the lower abdomen. That is not pain. That is the first signal of lymphatic movement. Week 3, most men report something specific. Not flexibility gains, not strength. Clarity in the lower abdomen. A reduction in what they had been describing as chronic pelvic pressure. That is not coincidence. That is drainage. Week 6, if you are consistent, the changes stop being described in terms of the squat. Men start describing shifts in digestion, in the absence of pelvic heaviness that used to be a permanent baseline, in mental clarity that had been attributed to age, in energy that had been declining without explanation. The system was not broken, it was waiting. Hold the position now if you are able. 90 seconds. Time it. Feel what happens in the pelvic floor at the 60-second mark. That pressure, that beginning of release at the base. That is the mechanism engaging. When pelvic lymph flows, the downstream effects are not subtle. Cytokine clearance increases. The inflammatory burden in the pelvic basin drops. Immune cells move more efficiently through the iliac chain. Testosterone metabolism, prostate health, gut motility, all depend on this drainage being unobstructed. And here is the aging connection. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now among the most studied drivers of cellular aging. It accelerates telomere shortening. It disrupts mitochondrial signaling. It degrades the extracellular matrix, the structural architecture of every organ you carry. When the lymphatic system in the pelvic basin clears, when the cytokine load reduces, the cellular environment shifts. Not metaphor, biology. The yogic lineages that preserved this position did not document it as a health practice. They documented it as a requirement. Daily pelvic floor maintenance was not optional for men living into their 80s in those systems. It was as fundamental as breathing practice. They understood, without the vocabulary of modern biology, that the base of the body requires movement to function. The modern world took that movement away and called the resulting decline aging. The 1% who still do this are not doing yoga. They are running biological maintenance that modern medicine has no prescription for. They are maintaining a system that is not monitored until it breaks. 3 minutes a day, 90 seconds twice. No protocol beyond what your body was built to do. The question is not whether this works. The biology has answered that. The question is how long your system has been waiting. Drop a number in the comments. How many years since you last squatted this deep? Think about it. That number is your biological debt. Today is when it starts to clear.